Welcome to the Success with Jewelry podcast, where we invite you inside our conversations about business success and marketing for jewelry designers and entrepreneurs.
We're Laryssa and Liz, jewelry marketing experts with a combined 16 years of experience in jewelry marketing and proven track records in helping jewelry brands meet their goals. When you listen to or watch this podcast, you get an intimate and exclusive peek behind the curtain of all the things you wish you could know about earning success in this industry.
Welcome to episode 116. In this episode, we're joined by Elise Thompson, the talented designer behind Mejia Jewelry, founder of Space 85, and owner of Henieli International. Elise's family has been in the gemstone business for over 40 years, dealing in rare and beautiful gems. In our conversation, we'll explore how to build confidence when purchasing gemstones, drawing on Elise's extensive experience and insights. For our bonus content, we'll dive into the crucial topic of identifying red flags when vetting a gem dealer, knowledge every jewelry professional should have. If you're looking to gain access to this exclusive content, visit successwithjewelry.com. Elise and Laryssa, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Hey, Elise, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me. This is my first podcast, so I'm really excited.
Yay.
Hey.
We love that. We're going to be like the podcast that interviews people who have never been interviewed on a podcast before. That's what we'll be known for.
Yeah, it's really fun. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We'd love to hear a little bit about your journey in the jewelry industry.
Sure. So my gemstone company's name is Henieli International, and we're based out of New York. I grew up in the industry. My parents started, it's a wholesale gemstone industry, and they started it in 1982 in New York City. So I was always surrounded by gems. I remember being dazzled by my mom's jewelry when I was younger and visiting the office and looking at all the stones. I started working with my dad around 2005, 2006 full time. And from then till now, that's when I also started making my own jewelry, which is Mejia Jewelry. And I started an online curated collection of designers called Space 85. That's space85.com. For Henieli International, we don't have an office in the city anymore, but I always go to the city once or twice a week, and I deliver stones to my clients, and I ship all over the country. And now I started to do small trunk shows. Last year, I started doing these small trunk shows at Myron Toback. And if you don't know who they are, they sell findings for jewelers. They've also been in the business for like 50 years. So I'm doing another trunk show there, March 5th through 7th. So if you're in the New York area, please stop by. I love to show everyone and talk about stones. Yeah, so we've been in the business for 42 years. I have a lot of relationships with designers and retailers and other gemstone dealers and cutters. I started, I guess, being introduced into that world when I was about 16, and I was helping my parents at trade shows like the AGTA show in Tucson. And that just changed everything. Being a young person and being exposed to all of that, it's like being in a museum for a week. You're exposed to, all different types of gemstones and dinosaur bones and fossils, and just you get huge amethyst geodes, and, having access to all of that in one place and seeing that as a young person is really magical. So I think that's what really got me so passionate about stones. I didn't initially start working directly in the business. I was in internet marketing for a while, and then I got my GG, my gemological degree, in 2005-ish, like the end of 2005. I studied at GIA's campus in Florence, Italy. I quit my job and I just lived in Italy for a year. And that was also life-changing. to study gems and be in Florence, like the art history capital of the world, is pretty incredible. Um, and so after that is when I started working with my dad full time. And then, so I had like the technical experience of working with gemstones and studying them under a microscope. And then I learned all of the practical knowledge from my dad, like working with the gems day to day and having him teach me. So
Did you have in mind that you wanted to work with him and that's kind of why you went down this
yeah.
path, or did it evolve like over time?
Um, I I always wanted to work with him, but my parents never let me. They were
Oh,
like, oh,
okay.
no, no, you can't do this. You have to go into finance. You have to do other things, you know? And then finally, I was just like, please, please, Dad, can I please work with you? And they gave in, and that was
So
beginning at
funny.
the end. Yeah. So
I
it was,
love that.
yeah, it was a fun journey.
That's amazing. How has those two things helped each other? Like one, like knowing about gemstones and pursuing jewelry design, and also how has like being a jewelry designer helped selling gems?
Yeah, they definitely work hand in hand. Um, I think from a design perspective, so when I'm designing, I'm drawn to color first, and then the shape and the cut. Um, and I love inclusions too, but I also appreciate very clean stones because that could be very rare. So you could have like a completely clean rubellite, which is extremely rare and special, but inclusions can be just as special too. Um, for example, like you can have a stone that has like an inclusion in it that looks like a rainbow. Moonstones, adulorescence is caused by inclusions. So inclusions are just very magical um, properties of a gemstone, especially if it's in a cabochon. Like I love cabs. And so with Henieli, we were famous for cabochons, and we still are. Um, and then sometimes I'll design around the stone first, and always that usually happens when I'm doing a custom project too, where we'll design around the stone first, and then the type of jewelry that it'll become is the second factor. Um, and then in terms of designing a collection, I'm really bad at designing collections, like at one time. So I like to jump around and I'll, want to use this gemstone for one thing and that gemstone for another thing. So I have a hard time staying within the framework of a cohesive collection. But eventually over time, I can kind of put pieces together that look like they're a part of the same collection. Um, and I realized that that's just the way I work, and that's okay. I think.
Yeah, I mean, it always comes through like just knowing you and knowing your different collections. It always comes through in telling a strong story.
I'm glad that it comes through.
Let's talk more about gemstones. I'm interested to hear about like your favorite gemstones and then like your mom's favorite gemstones and kind of what you were most surrounded by growing up and then also like any trends you're seeing in the market right now.
Sure. Um, so my favorite gemstones are mandarin garnet, which is like this ring. It's like that really orange, bright orange garnet color. And Savorite garnet and mint green tourmaline. That was my dad's favorite stone. Tourmalines in general are our favorite stones, and cabochons, just because, I mean, I think like cabochons just have this aura about them. They just have so much character. And it can be a tiny 3 millimeter stone that just sucks you in. It could just be bright, bright Savorite green and pop. Um, and then the bigger the stone, the more inclusions it has, so it could just be more interesting. Um, And in terms of trends, I'm looking forward to going to Tucson next week to see what the trends are. But I think tourmaline is a big, has been a big trend, and I think it'll remain that way. Paraiba is really hot. Garnets, like grape garnet, like purple garnet, fancy colored garnets. I think like I love fancy color sapphires. So that can mean like purples and greens and like off-colored kind of peachy colors. Um, I think it'll be interesting to see if like the smoky color comes back this year because of like Pantone's Mocha Mousse. So like smoky quartz or smoky topaz, brown tourmaline, like these off-color tourmalines are becoming more popular. Um, so we'll see. I'll have more to report after I go to Tucson too.
Yeah, let us know. But Mandarin Garnet's one I've been seeing a lot of, and then like Paraiba and like
Yeah,
mid-colored tourmalines
yeah.
is something I've been seeing a lot. And then, I'm not sure if it's like the press or what people are actually buying, but like the mocha mousse, like the brown color, the rich color. Yeah.
Right. Right. And I'm curious to see if like that will just make it more popular because I don't know if that it has really been that popular, that color so far. I could be wrong, but we'll see.
Do you sell gemstones at Tucson or you're going to buy?
I'm going there this year to observe, to
Mhm.
learn, to like reignite my contacts, to
Mhm.
buy something if I see it. I don't sell there anymore. We used to exhibit at AGTA for over 30 years, but I haven't done that in a while. It's more fun to buy. I have to say.
I'm
I like
sure.
being on the other side of the booth.
Mhm. Yeah. Are
Yeah.
there any specific things you're looking for this year? Or are you just looking for some interesting stuff that stands out to you?
I'm looking for a very rare stone called cerulorite, and it comes in bead form.
Mhm.
And I saw it last year, and I was so intrigued by it, and I didn't buy it, and I've been thinking about it all year. So this year, I'm going to try to buy some. They're beads. I love working with beads in my jewelry, so it's just something new that I've never worked with before.
I'm looking it up because I have never heard of it before.
It's kind of like a spotted blue, um, a little deeper color than a blue opal, but it has like interesting uh coloration and patterns.
I feel like Larissa and I have been learning so much because we chatted with Alyssa for tips about Tucson. And then we chatted with, and this episode's coming out after your episode, but with Monica Stevenson from um,
Oh,
Anza
yeah,
Gems. And
sure.
yeah, and so I feel like we're learning a lot about gems recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun topic.
And it's
It's
cool that you can then bring that to your audience because I'm assuming if you were to buy that, you would sell that at retail, right?
Right, right, because I'm going to make a piece of jewelry from it. Yeah,
Mhm.
I won't sell it as a Henieli piece, but that'll be for Mejia Jewelry.
So let's get into this for designers, because I think that, people come into the industry from a lot of different ways. Like some designers come from a love of design, some come from a love of gemstones, and some, just love metalsmithing. I feel like there's a lot of ways to get here. But for the designers who aren't as familiar with gemstones, what are some key tips or like, key factors to consider when you're thinking about buying stones?
Sure. I think the first step is you have to have an idea of what you're looking for or have a loose plan because without it, you can easily feel overwhelmed or you can do the opposite and get carried away and buy a lot of things that you don't end up using. But when all else fails, I think you just go with your gut. If you love it, someone else will love it too. And if you don't buy what you love at the moment, then you might not ever see it again. I always find that with the gemstones that I love the most and I'm most passionate about, those are the ones that I tend to sell first. Um, and they don't have to be the most expensive or rare stones. I can get excited about, a cool inclusion about in a deep blue aquamarine cab that has a rainbow inclusion or a cool pattern in a watermelon tourmaline, and then that passion will transfer to the client. Another important thing to consider is that sometimes if something is too good to be true, it usually is. And so what that means is that if a stone is too cheap, but it looks beautiful, something like it's just too good to be true. How can this, perfect specimen be this price? Something is off. So that's why experience is important. And it's important to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask a lot of questions. And it's important to feel comfortable with the person who you're buying from.
I have a follow-up question about that too good to be true thing.
Mhm.
So like I've never been to Tucson, but at JCK they have the like AGTA section. And obviously I'm not a jewelry designer, but I love to look and I'm like shopping for myself sometimes and I have no idea like how much things should be or what is a good price or what is expensive. And
Yeah.
that part feels very overwhelming to me. Do you have advice about how to get up to speed on like market prices?
Pricing, yeah. Well, market pricing, it just comes with experience and you have to just ask questions and get a range. So know that, this type of material, let's say like light pale amethyst should cost between, $4 and $8 a carat. And then medium will cost between $8 and $12 a carat. And then fine might cost between $12 and $24 a carat and up. And then within that range, then for cabs or for pieces with inclusions, the price fluctuates. So you just have to educate yourself and ask a lot of questions so that you can gauge what the market value is. And
Mhm.
prices always change too. They're not stable. They will always change because of a political condition in a certain country or because of demand, things are always changing.
I think something that's interesting about you selling gemstones, and I've heard this from designers in Stay Gold who have purchased from you, like just the trust factor. Like, oh, I purchased from Elise because I trust her. Like, I wasn't able to go to the trunk show in New York because I'm not local, but she sent pictures and I trust, because I know her, I trust her kind of thing. And I think that's such an important thing, like that can be used across any aspect of a business, especially in selling fine goods like jewelry or gemstones, that like
Yeah,
knowing the person you're buying from is so important.
it is. It's so important. And I think and then, for first time buyers, they don't know the person who they're buying from. So that's why feeling comfortable with that person that you're buying from is really important because, you can get an aura from someone and you could just know. I think that's important.
Should designers be like looking for like certifications or authentic off what how do you say
Authentication.
Authentication, yeah, yeah.
Sorry, guys. Should designers be looking for like certification or authentication? Did I say that wrong
Yeah,
again?
no, it's right. It's right. Authentication. Yeah. Um, it's not necessary. It depends on what stones you need it for. So, for example, you might want to cert, we call it a cert in the industry, um, for an unheated sapphire, for example, that is an investment. So you might want to have a cert for that. So more important stones that you're going to spend more money on that you want verified, um, could have a cert, but not every stone will have a cert. Like it doesn't make sense to have $100 cert for a $25 stone, you know. So prices also range for certs. So if you want an origin report, that will cost more money because the stone has to have, go under certain testing. And then you can also get discounts on certs, like if you submit stones in bulk that you want certed, then it'll be lower cost. But I know that some companies will issue like little credit card certs, and those are cheaper than like an in-depth, paper cert. So it depends.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess sometimes the end consumer might ask for that and not quite understanding what that is.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so that's why it's important that, you as the designer or the retailer, you educate them so that they understand.
So when it comes to like the 4 Cs, which I feel like a lot of people have heard, whether they're like in the industry or not, like that's kind of like where the knowledge sometimes stops for people. I think the like cut, color, clarity, and carat. Is that for all colored gems, or is that like just a diamond thing?
It's a diamond thing. The 4Cs are used in diamond grading, but you can definitely consider those when you're buying colored stones. So for colored stones, obviously the most important C is color, because that's what you're looking for. And then your budget for that stone will determine the size and the clarity. So it will determine the carat and the clarity that you can afford. And cut is important too, because you want a well-cut stone in order for the stone to have the maximum amount of brilliance. You don't want to overpay for stones that have big bellies, and especially in sapphires. So the bulk of the weight would be in the pavilion, and I can talk about that more in the bonus content. And then on the other hand, some designers might want flat stones. So it all depends on your preference. Some people prefer shallower cut stones.
Are there any common misconceptions or myths about gemstones you want to point out?
Yes, definitely. I think a huge misconception is that colored gemstones are cheap and not rare. And it is so far from the truth, because there are colored stones like alexandrite or tsavorite or mandarin garnet or red beryl or paraiba that are so much more rare than any diamond. And there's collector stones like benitoite is a collector stone that's found in California. And these stones are way more rare than diamonds, but the end consumer has no idea what these stones are. Or even, really beautiful tourmalines are hard to come by. Everything is becoming increasingly more rare. And I think it's important to educate the consumer about colored stones. And because I think they're way more interesting than diamonds too.
Have lab-grown colored gems affected the natural market at all? And is there any risk when someone's shopping for gems that they might accidentally buy something lab-grown that they thought was natural?
Yeah. I don't think it's affected the colored stone market, because we've always had colored lab-grown stones. And there are companies that make them, that have been making them. But there's always a risk that you could buy something that's fake, obviously. That's why trust is important, and knowing who you're buying from is important.
In terms of tips for first-time buyers, what should they be asking for or looking for?
I think if you can invest in a loupe, so you always have a loupe handy, and inspect the stones that you have so you can become familiar with what they look like and what they feel like. And when you're going shopping, bring your loupe and look at the stones. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think it's okay to ask why a stone is the price that it is, because price can depend on so many factors like market value, when the stone was purchased, the rarity of the stone, if it has inclusions, how well cut it is, when and where it was cut. So, I think, yeah, just don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be intimidated.
I love that. And Laryssa asked a couple questions about pricing, like any other tips about like how do you know that you're not overpaying? And is buying gemstones a place where you can negotiate?
Yeah. Again, like educate yourself and know market value so that you know if you're overpaying or not. And what was the second part of your question? Sorry.
Can you negotiate?
Yes, can you negotiate? Sure. You can negotiate, but be respectful about it. I'm okay with people politely asking for a discount. I'm always like, if I can make it work, I make it work. But sometimes margins are just too thin, and if there really is no room, then then there is no room. But it's never hurts to ask.
This is great. Any other tips you want to share?
Any other tips I want to
We missed.
share?
Did you take notes on anything that we missed?
I did. Can I go through it for a second and I'll
Mhm.
Oh yeah. So, um, when when you're buying stones, if you have a budget, it's important to let the dealer know so that they can steer you in the right direction. I find I can help people better if I know their budget and what size and colors they're looking for, and then I can narrow down the search for them. And then it'll end up in a success. Like you'll find what you're looking for. So don't be afraid to let them know your budget, no matter how small it is, no matter, how big it is. And the more you know about the stone, the better. So definitely you can ask the dealer the origin of the stone. And sometimes they might not know when or where it was mined because it could be from old stock. And that's okay because there's a lot of stones out there that are on the market that need to be consumed so that we can make room for like newer, more ethical stones. So I think definitely always, going to back to the beginning is always ask questions.
Well, Elise, thanks for being here. How can people find you if they want to come to your next trunk show?
Yeah, so my next trunk show will be March 5th through March 7th. And it will be at the Myron Toback showroom in New York City. You can contact me at Elise, Elise, at Henieli, HENIELI.com, or find me on Instagram at Henieli Gems. I also have an eBay store, not an eBay store, sorry, an Etsy store. An Etsy shop for gemstones. It has like some of our inventory, not all of it, but you can get an idea of what types of stones we carry, and that's called Cabochon King. And the name comes from when my dad started the business, he was known for cabochons, so they dubbed him the Cabochon King.
I love it.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thanks so much for being here.
great.
All right. Are you new to buying gems, let us know. Visit successwithjewelry.com. And if you love the podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Send us a message or leave us a review. Thanks for being a part of the Success with Jewelry community.